Hello everybody, this is Mike at Gamefromscratch, and today we're finally going to look at configuring Eclipse to work with LibGDX. In the past, we've already looked at setting up a Java and Android development environment, and we also looked at configuring IntelliJ. Now it's Eclipse's turn. Right up front, to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of Eclipse, so if I let a little bit of that drip into my presentation, I'm sorry. I just find it can be a little unwieldy at times, and yeah, I've lost many an hours to this IDE, so on occasion I can get a bit irrationally angry at it, so if I do, I apologize. Anyways, in this particular tutorial, we're going to look at setting up Eclipse, configuring all the various plugins you need to get it to run, and then showing how to run an Android and a desktop, and finally a web application from Eclipse. You may notice I did not mention iOS. There's a pair of reasons for that. First off, I'm running on Windows for this, and you actually need a Mac to follow along. And second, it's somewhat an involved process, especially if you want to deploy, because you need to have your Mac developer certificates all in a row, so we may look at that as a separate video later on. So once again, we're not going to be covering running and configuring for iOS, which means RoboVM. I will point out the URL when it's time, but we won't actually be covering the installation process. All right, let's get started. First thing we need to do is install Eclipse itself. Eclipse is available completely free. It's a download available at this website, https://www.eclipse.org/downloads. Now, if you head over to that site, it will bring you to this page. There are a number of versions available. The key thing you want is probably this one. For Java EE developers is it's got a lot of optional stuff that you do not need. Also, in my experience, the more you add to Eclipse, the worse Eclipse is. So you want to strip down as it gets. So this is the guy you want, Eclipse IDE for Java developers. It'll auto-detect your platform. If not, choose it here. So simply pick the version that you want and click the mirror. As you can see, I've already downloaded it. Eclipse itself is just a zip file. So come on in and extract it to wherever you want to install it. Like so. And that's the install process. I'll pause so you don't have to watch this. Alright, Eclipse should now be installed. Simply navigate to it and run Eclipse. Do this the first time. We want to get our workspace set up. We'll configure after the fact. Alright, if you haven't already run Eclipse, it's going to ask you where to create a workspace. Workspace can be thought of sort of like a super project. It's where all of your projects will be stored. Go ahead and create the default wherever you wish. Alright, and welcome to Eclipse. First thing you want to do is click over here on the workbench. This gets you into the Eclipse proper. It appears it's got leftovers from an old install. I'll just go ahead and delete all that. There. Now we're completely fresh. The first thing we need to do is install and configure a number of plugins to make things work. Earlier we installed Android and Gwt. However, that does not include the Android plugins for those particular SDKs. If you did use the Android SDK that included Eclipse, you can skip part of this step. However, I'm assuming that you followed along the early instructions, so you need to install everything. So let's go ahead and add those plugins. In order to do so, all you do is come over to the Help menu and do Install New Software. First one we're going to want to do is add the Google one. That is the Android tools for Eclipse. They are available at this address, https://dl-ssl.google.com/android/eclipse. Simply take that URL and click Add here. Let's say Google Android Tools, and enter it there. And then just click OK. You'll go ahead and fetch them all. There's various different tools available inside. The key one you need is this one. That's definitely a handy tool. It's the debugger management system, I think is what the acronym stands for. This is for profiling OpenGL calls. Some of these things may be useful to you down the road, so I'm just going to go ahead and do an all install and simply click next. This is actually going to take a little bit of time. Okay, yep, next. and agree to the license terms, and finish. So let it go ahead and do the download. I'll be back in a few seconds. Okay, back a few seconds early. If during the install you get a security warning basically saying that you're downloading and installing unsigned content, just go ahead and click OK. And the installation continues. Be back soon. Oh, there, we're finished. All right, so just go ahead and let it restart Eclipse. And it's out of focus. Let it choose the workspace again. Okay. So now we now have Android configured correctly. Let's go ahead and set up the GWT, which is Google Web Toolkit tools. If you're not doing the web development stuff, you don't need to worry about this at all. Oops. Okay, 1 second. All right, sorry, I forgot the link for this one. To get the GWT tools, you go to this address, http://dl.google.com/eclipse/plugin/4.3. Obviously, if you are watching this sometime in the future and the version has changed, you will probably need to update this link. So just pick it, and exact same process, help, install new software, add. There's actually more there than just the GWT tools, so give it a bit more of a generic name, and click OK. It will go find the repository, populate the available options. There we go. Okay. That one needs to be installed. Don't really need App Engine. Let's see what SDKs are. Don't really need any SDKs installed because we've installed it externally. So the plugin should be sufficient. Yeah, don't need App Engine. We'll go ahead and install the designer. I don't think we actually need it for anything, but just to be safe. Once again, just click Next. It's going to go through, bring up a summary of what's supposed to be installed, and then once again, you're going to have to click the agreements and let it install. Once again, be back in a few seconds. If you do get a warning, just click OK. Once again, it's going to ask you to reboot Eclipse. Go ahead and let it. You're probably safe to say no and do all the reboots at once. Again, Eclipse is a fickle beast to me, so I just go with the path of least resistance on this and just reboot each time I add a plugin. Once again, you can probably do all these installs and then reboot after the fact, but just better safe than sorry in this case. All right, finally, the next mandatory piece we need to install is Gradle support. Gradle is a build system for Java, and LibGDX uses it heavily. Once again, same process. We take this link, dist.springsource.com/snapshots/tools/Gradle/nightly, which is the most current version. If you've got an older version of Eclipse for some reason, you need to do a different install. Go to the LibGDX installation page. They will tell you the URL there. Okay, so once you've got this, once again, we just come up here, install new software. We'll go with, oops, my bad. Application, name it. Click OK. I don't know if we need the optional. I don't think we do. Sure, I have no idea what that is, to be honest. So I'm just going to go ahead and install it. Same as last time. It's going to go through and... Oh, and again, we have a Eclipse-related bug. Be right back. I'll see what's... All right. You know what? We got the piece I think we need to be installed. We'll just go ahead and let it install. Next. Accept the license. Finish. This should be almost instant, so I'll just leave it to run. All right, Gradle's now installed. One last reboot. As I said before, I'm not covering RoboVM specifically, but if you are on a Mac and you do want RoboVM, by the way, is the technology that makes it so you can deploy a Java application on iOS. If you're working in Eclipse, you'll want the RoboVM Eclipse plugin. You can add it the exact same way we've added everything else. Its URL is download.robovm.org/eclipse. So you can go ahead and add that if you're working on a Mac. Sometime in the future, I'll probably do a tutorial specifically about working in it. But for now, you can get it installed that way. So, don't save. Our Eclipse now is fully configured. In theory, everything should work just fine. So let's go ahead and create a project. If I still have the LibGDX installer, yes I do. So load this up. Let's just go ahead and say Eclipse demo. Version you need, don't need iOS, don't need any extensions, don't need any tools. Now, once again, you have the option of going in here and configuring Eclipse. You don't really need to do it though, so I will show you why in a moment. So just go ahead and click generate. Yes, yes. And this takes about between 10 and 15 seconds, I've seen. It's all depending on your current internet speed, your computer speed, etc. Mostly internet. Should be just about done. There we go. 13.5 seconds in my case. So now we've just created a new project, LibGDX project. Let's go ahead and get it into Eclipse. So open up Eclipse, go to File, and then go Import. You want General, and then Existing Projects into Works. Oh, actually, you don't. Let's go with Gradle. Why is Gradle not available? 1 second. All right, so you want Import, go down to Gradle, and select Gradle Project. Next, click Next. Now what you want to do is navigate to the folder you just created for the LibGDX project. I have this very bad habit of doing everything out of my Downloads folder, so that's where it's going to be located, like so. The next thing you do is click this button called Build Model. It will then go and read through the Gradle project, figure out what's what. You want to import everything. Let me just make sure all the great working set. Working sets are ways of grouping things together inside of, so basically you can have associated projects inside of Eclipse. Choose that or not, your call. Once we're done, go ahead and click Finish. And it's now going to import the Gradle project. This should only take a couple seconds, so I'll just leave it running. As you can see over here on the side of Package Explorer, each of our projects is coming up. As you may recall from if you've done any LibGDX work already, it's organized. Each project itself has its own folder, so there's an Android folder, an iOS folder, an HTML folder, and then the core is where all your common code goes. All right. Java Home is configured. Cannot find Java compiler. JDK Java Home is set. There's Java Home. Welcome to Eclipse. All right, 1 second. Okay, I think we can actually ignore that error for now, as confident as that sounds. The next thing is we don't have our GWT path configured. The GWT is the Google WebKit we downloaded in the setting up your environment. So now we have to go ahead and configure that. In order to do that, come over here to your HTML project, the one with the exclamation mark over beside it, and just right-click, scroll down to the bottom, and locate the Google section. If you don't have this, it means the plugin wasn't installed from earlier. This is part of what is installed. Same with Gradle. If you don't have the Gradle here, you did not successfully install the Gradle plugin. So go over to the Google one and go down to Web Toolkit Settings. And use Web Toolkit is yes, but what we want to do is go ahead and configure the set. If you did the, as part of the plugin, you said include the SDK, you won't have to go through this step. However, if you install the SDK separately like we did earlier, you will. Just simply click Configure It, add one, browse to the location you installed it. so. Click OK, and done. And all your problems are gone. So everything should now work just fine. Let's now look at the process of running each particular application. First off, we have our desktop project, the easiest place to start with. You should be able to either run or debug it. Just simply come down to go debug as or run as. So debug as Java application. It is now going to go off and look for all the various mains that are available in that project. The key one that you want is the desktop launcher. This is the one that comes from your code. So click OK, and that's how easy it is to run a desktop application. Android application, almost just as simple. Just right-click and scroll down, go either debug as or run as. Android application. If you did not watch the previous tutorial about configuring IntelliJ, you need to make sure that you have an Android virtual machine created and configured. That can be done from going to the address you installed your Android SDK to, in which case, here's mine. There is a thing called AVD, which is your virtual machine manager. Load it up. Okay. See, I've already created a virtual machine, and that's what's in the process of loading, and it takes a year or two. Just kind of come in here and do create. And this is where you create a virtual machine. What settings you make it for don't really matter all that much. The key thing, however, is under emulation options, set use host GPU, or you will not be able to debug your application from LibGDX on here, because LibGDX depends on OpenGLES, and OpenGLES needs to be enabled on your local GPU. So make sure you have use host GPU set. So the run process is configuring this in the background. I said this in the IntelliJ tutorial. I will say it again here. If you have the option to run on a physical device, run on a physical device. The emulator is awful. As you can see, it is still loading. It will take forever. I'm actually going to go ahead and pause and let that finish loading. There you go. After it's loaded, took about 5 minutes total for the emulator to start on my machine. Here you can see it running. Over here, it's telling you, do you want to monitor Logcat? You do. Logcat is the built-in logging system in Android. There is invaluable information in there. You can see how much information you want to get. If you're a glutton for punishment, go with verbose. And what you'll see is all of the information that is coming from your emulator. So as you do things here in your emulator, they will be updated over here in log. So you can see the number of messages is greatly going up. That's why generally people set it to just either warnings or errors. So warning will give you warnings and errors, etc. So there you go. And there it is running in the emulator. You can actually, there's a number of controls available for the emulator, such as Control F12, changing you between landscape and portrait. You can get a complete list of what those controls and combinations are by going to developer.android.com/tools/help/emulator.html. And as you can see, they give you a lot of the devices, basically hard button devices, physical move stuff. This is your way of emulating them when you don't have an actual physical device. If I can give you, again, one last piece of advice, get a physical device. Working with the emulator is just a terrible developer experience. If you've got nothing else, obviously it works, but ideally you will work with an actual physical device. Alright, so that's running an Android and running a desktop. That leaves us, at least for this one, running an HTML project. Okay, now we're going to look at running the HTML project. This is where the Gradle plugin that you installed earlier comes in. If you do not see this menu, so right-click your HTML project, and if you do not see a Gradle menu there, Gradle is not correctly configured, so you're going to have an issue. As long as Gradle's there, you should be good to go. Next thing we want to do is go up to Window, go to Show View, and then down to Other. You want to navigate down until you find Gradle, and then Gradle Tasks. And it opens up this window. Next thing you want to do is locate SuperDev and simply double click. The first time this compiler runs, it can actually take a few seconds. So let's go ahead and pause. Okay, GWT compilation should be complete. At this point in time, it has transferred your Java code over to JavaScript code, and you should be able to run it in your browser. You see at the bottom here, it's running a server called Jetty, which is an embedded web server, and it wants you to visit the address of localhost 9876. You actually want to ignore that completely. Open up a browser, and instead, what you want to do is go to localhost 8080. Like so. And then pick /HTML, and there's your application running. So that's how you run the HTML app. Now the thing is, you've got a server running in the background here, and you want it to stop, most likely, because if you try to run it again the same way, it'll get a port already in use error. When you are done running your Jetty server, just go up here and click this little plus, and it will eventually shut down the application so you can run it again. So that's how you run an HTML application. Now you may actually notice I did a little bit of sleight of hand in my editing there. Remember back in time when we got this error? This is part of why I hate dealing with Eclipse. This kind of stuff happens in Eclipse all the time. I'm not sure if this is a Java error, a Gradle error, or an Eclipse error, but all I know is when you run Gradle from within Eclipse, this happened. Now the reason why this actually happened is for some reason it's telling me it can't find Java through the Java home. Java home is a variable you should have set, and in order to set it, you just go in, it's an environment variable, so go to Properties of my computer, Advanced System Settings, and Environment Variables. And you should have it set. I actually edited it there. The real setting is that. So you should have Java underscore home, and then it's the path to your JDK. If this is set, this error makes absolutely no sense. And if you go online, which I just finished doing, all kinds of people encountered this. There's also another problem that's very common with Eclipse, is it has a knack of running in the wrong JVM. So this can be fixed with a combination of those two things. Ironically, since I went and tried to fix it, it no longer occurs on my computer. Oh, the joys of Eclipse. If you run into this problem, however, it's fairly simple to fix it. First thing you need to do is go into Windows, Window menu, then Preferences. Go down to Java and install JREs. And what you want to do is remove whatever junk it's got there, and then add one, a standard VM, and then the path to wherever you installed your JDK. Such as, in my case, I went ahead and I created this guy, which is just path to where my JDK is actually installed. So now that's the only option, is the JRE I installed. After you do that, you may or may not have to go into the Gradle settings, arguments. And Gradle is pulling its Java home from the Gradle wrapper, which I believe is the gradlu.bat in your project file. Instead, what you want to do is set it to use your workspace JRE, like so. Click apply, and that error should go away. Ironically, once you fix it once, you don't need to set that anymore anyways. This is one of those examples of where Eclipse breaks constantly. So if you run into that, make sure that your actually if you run into any errors with a new install of Eclipse, make sure that it's using the right JRE. Like I said, go into Windows, Preferences, Java, install JREs, and make sure it's pointed at your JDK and not one that's shipped with Windows or Mac or whatever. You want it to be the right version. That fixes so many problems right away. If that's still a problem, then go in and configure the Gradle to use your JDK as opposed to the one that it's supposed to find in Java Home. Another thing that you're going to do when you run into problems with Eclipse, always clean. Just come in here and say clean, and this is like sort of saying Eclipse, fix your stuff. And a lot of times this fixes it, sometimes it doesn't, but this should almost always be your first step, because Eclipse is probably the most fragile IDE I have ever worked with in my entire life. It corrupts projects all the time, and when this stuff happens, a lot of times a clean will fix it. So if you run into problems, make sure your JRE is set right, run a clean, and worst case scenario, restart it, reboot. And hopefully your problem goes away.